Hello everyone, we're gonna see together how we can modernize user interface with ease. So I present myself, I'm Gabriel Inzirillo, I work for AJAR SA in Switzerland. We are the Swiss distributor of 4D software. I make 4D support and expertise, and I develop also some component that we will see soon. So 4D applications are old, ugly, not friendly, and some kind of bad words that I used to hear from different people. And I ask myself why people think that of 4D. So because it is true, but I put true in quote because it's true is a relative reality. So why it is true? Most 4D applications tend to be old. We don't have a lot of time allocated for design and interface, and most applications also are more oriented, business oriented. We use a lot of input-output forms, which are more designed for 15 years ago. We don't have much refactorization of existing application that could look nice 10, 15 years ago, but today we are not really in the latest design possibility. And there is some missing default in the graphical element of 4D. So this reason is not a really good one, because it's true we don't have the same richness in 4D form than we have in HTML or CSS, but if we know how to use the existing one, we can do some nice things. So some example here of working form, but not really elegant. So basic input-output forms with some file fields put on top of each other. So it's some things we can see in some applications. Sometimes they are grouped together, is a little bit better, but still not really attractive. And sometimes we have such a application with really basic information and just put all the field together. So what developers says? They say we don't have time to spend into design form. We are developing a business application. We are not doing a web application. We are developer. We are not designer. The specification never include anything about specification. I do the feature. The feature they are working well. So I don't see any problem, and the end user never complain. So what is the problem about? So yes, if we don't have time, sometimes the specification doesn't I mean the project planning doesn't include the time to be spent in designing, and that's something which is missing, because it's important to define what the end user need, and what are the ergonomy of the application we want. It's a business application, so it must be sexy, because a business application is to make money. So if your application doesn't attract new people or keep the old one, you will make lost. So yes, for the developer, I'm more developer than designer, but in 4D we have to do a little bit of everything. We don't write code all day, and if you know somebody who only write 4D code, I'm telling you, he's really lucky one, and I think we all want his job. The specification which doesn't includes design stuff, for me is not a good specification, because you must take care of how the user gonna use the application. Will it be close to the screen, far from the screen? he will spend long time or short time behind the application. It will be with another client while he use the application. All those questions will orientate the way you design your form. And if the end user never complain, maybe because he use it from long time, he get use of this application, it's work the way he likes, so he never complain. But as soon as somebody new in the company will have to use your application, maybe he don't like it, it's look old, and you will already look in another application to replace it, and so it will be too late already. When you hear the complaint, it's already for me too late to design. You should be able to redesign time to time the design of your application. For the forms object don't allow us to build nice form. Yes, that is another point, but we will see that is not totally true. So why interface is important? So it's really important to make funny and colorful design. That is really the main point. But of course it's not true. It's not that the point. But here I want to show you how with color and special design we can attract the focus of somebody. And of course the correct slide here will be to help the user to focus on the important data. So this is really important in interface, is to help the user to feel comfort and his eyes to be pleased, and not to look all everywhere to find what is important. And of course this will attract new client and make your application to prosper in time. So how can we help you? So in AJAR we have developed some component into a suite of components we call AJUI suite, and in the component menu we have buttons, tips, breadcrumb, banner, progress bar, and floating label. So enough talking, let's dive into a small demonstration. So we will see some example of forms made with our component. The first one is a data explorer where we display company, employee, invoice all in one window. So here we have a list of entry. When we click, we see the detailed form. So the first thing we will see is the tip. When we click on a field, it can help the user to know which data to enter. We see also the label is changing, of the color is changing while we select one field. So it helps to visualize in which field we are. There is also when we save, we see a banner that display instead of a window, of a pop-up window. If I select employees and I move down, we will see that this one he get fired. So we have directly visual feedback that some data is important. Is more visualized than this small checkbox on the top corner. So this banner help you to have a nice feedback. We have also a plus button here in the phone. So if I click, we see the phone display big. So this can be useful for people who are far from the screen, for example. If the font is too small, it can be helpful. The next things, we have a do big operation button. So we see on over the button, the color of the button is changing. So that is also something we add with our component. So if I click, I have a visual feedback that something is going on, and it's nice to have such feedback. So in the invoice, we see another banner on top right. It shows that the invoice is already shipped. So let's look at invoice that is not shipped. Okay, this one. If we click the plus button, instead of having a window to display the form, we have directly a tab which include a subform. So it's directly inside your form. You have the tip, and we can choose a product, the quantity. If we save, uh, everything. So it's a different way to display. So let's ship it, and the progress bar is directly included inside our form. So it's give also a nice visual feedback. Okay, that's the Data Explorer first example. The next one is a pay station. So it's like in the shop today, we can scan our own article. So here I wanted to create something similar, just as an example. So here we can choose the language. Here I choose French. I have a fake scanning article. So if I click, I scan some article. I add some, okay, dates, choose, different stuff. So we see we have some button here to add some article that don't have barcode. So fruits, vegetable, and here for bonus point, for example, we have a tip that explains what bonus point. Here we have kind of coin, which is a progress bar that show after $500 you save $5. So let's try to save our $5, and here we see a tip that jump to give also a visual feedback that we save $5. If I right click on one line, I can add some article. I reach again the $5 save. So again here I have a small subform inside a tip. Okay, so this kind of form interface is quite nice. Let's pay with the card. So we simulate that now I'm paying with the card. I enter my code, tick tick tick. I print the receipt. Okay, and then we have a thanks message. And after that we are ready for the next customer. So that is the second example of what we can do in 4D. We can always change the language, and yes. So the next example, we will see more in details how to transform our old form and modernize it with the component and some tricks. So here it's the old forms with some a button that allow to select company, employee, product, some buttons. So here we have the list, the details, something quite simple. So for invoice. So the purpose is to take this form and to make it a little bit nicer. So we'll try our best in the small times we have. So the first things we will do is we will use new form. So I keep the new and the old forms so we can compare them at the end. So each subform is also duplicated. So let's open it, and the first things to do is to we will change the save button to be a little bit nicer and to see how we implement via a GUI button. Let's open we call it lab. The lab is I have a HDI example, how do I example, but with the you can find everything on GitHub. You find the component, the doc, but the interesting is the lab. So let's open the project. Let's see how it can help us to create some templates for our application. So you see a lot of how do I example. So let's see the button lab. The lab is a special form that allow you to define every properties of a button. We inspired from the property panel of 4D, so we stay in something we are used to. So we see a lot of template here. This is by default in the lab of the button. And we see there is a G for global, and they are stored in the global preference folder. So we will select a personal folder where we want to store our template. So we will choose our database for the summit. So let's select our project, and we will store it in the resource. As you see, we have a GUI button template. So everything we will do in the lab, it will directly be saved in the resource of our project. So I prepare already the folder which contains some template we use in the other example. So let's select it. Okay, we save. Now we create a new template and we will save it in the personal folder. The name, we will call it new form default. Okay, we validate. So now we want some values. We will create our button. So we want a rectangle, it can be circle also. We want text, but it can be picture, or it can also be composite of text and picture. So let's just select text for now. So by default, we have the color. We don't want any border. The background color will be this one. Corner radius it's 5. -1 means it's gonna fit the object draw in the form. The composite we don't need, picture we don't need, and the text it will be white. Font size 16, it's okay, and let's change the label to template. Okay. So it updates our 5 states in the preview, and the interactive button show how it will behave. Let's move to another state. So on over, we want a different background. So let's change it. I changed the wrong background color. It's the primary one. Secondary is for composite button. Okay, so now on over the background change, and also on active. So you see every property are there for every state, so you have really full control. So now when we click the on active, you have a different color. We see the on focus because when I click I get focus, but if I tabulate we lose it. So that is also the last functionality we add to have focus. So let's save it in the personal folder, and let's see how to use it. So we want to create the object. So the object, it's the button is created with SVG, so we will import it in a input field that will be a picture. So not to have to create every time a field, set it picture with a special property, we have a library. So we can import this library, and we will open library. We will select our library is a project mod. So let's open and drag and drop it. So let's remove the save button. We can delete it. There's no code yet, it's just a static example. So let's change the name, save button. I will set some coordinate to be well aligned. And the size 110, 20. Okay, so let's see the code behind. So that is the default code, but let's write some code. So I copy paste to save a little bit time. Okay, let's see together. I have some generic code here, so I get the name with object get name for my widget. I call it widget not to use the object name. So on load we will create a new button. With the new AJUI button, it will return an object that contains every properties and every member function that we will use to define our button. So you can define every property via member function, and here we use templates, so we don't have much member function to define the behavior. The name is a must to give, and the label we will change to save because we want to save, and we will draw it. So the important things is the event that are checked for the input. So on load, on click, on getting focus, losing focus, mouse enter, leave and up. So all this event will help the component to define the different state of our button. So that's why the draw method member function is outside of a case of. So every event must call this method. So the name is not default template, we call it new form default. So, and I just have to set the template name because we are in the default folder which have the correct name. But you can also give the template path if you have stored a different place. It's always relative to resource folder because in a project you always use the resource for the content. So let's run it. Okay, our save button is already nicer with the different state. Perfect. The next example, we will do the same for the add, delete, and edit button. But here I want a picture. I don't want just simple text. So let's take back our template and we will duplicate it. Here, duplicate template. So now we have a copy and we will rename. Oh, yes, that is the demo effect. Let's select it good again. Rename it. Okay, now it's working. So let's call it new form default picked, and we select it as personal. Picked. I must have done some wrong things. Okay, so we will change the type of button. It will be a circle and with a picture inside. Okay, sorry. So it's a circle and a picture. Here the color, we will leave them to have the same color like in the save button, but we will add a picture. So let's select the path. So if we select the path, we have I save already in my template. I have the add button, add.svg. So I use svg because we see here it's black, but with SVG we can easily change the color because SVG is a XML based file, so we can easily pass it and check where is a color and replace it on the fly. So we have the color to replace property where we will tell which color we want to replace. So in our SVG is this 21, 21, 21. And we will replace by a white. So we see directly the component will replace the color on the fly, and you can set even a different color for each state. So you can see it's really on the fly. Here I have yellow for on over. So for only one picture, we can have different color. So this is an advantage we see for active, also blue. It's a I will put back white because it's not really nice, but we see it's a big advantage to use SVG over PNG or JPEG because you can change the color on the fly and you don't have to duplicate your picture for different state. Okay. I will just save that. I think it's enough for now. So let's save it. Let's move those one, or we can even delete it. Okay, I'll just duplicate. I delete those button, and I change the name. Add button. I will change the size to be 32, 32, and I will move it a little bit up. So like that, I think it's good. Let's check the code. Okay, we have to change the template name, which is new form default picked, and the label we don't need. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, we have our button, but I don't like too much. The plus button is too big for me. I want it to be a little bit smaller, so I will come back directly in the lab, and in the default state I will change the ratio to be a little bit smaller. So I will put 0.75 and I save it, and directly in I just have to relaunch my form, and directly the ratio change because of the lab is saved in the personal folder, which is directly in the resource. So you just have to save it, and when you load it on your form, it will load the correct JSON template, and that's really helpful. Let's duplicate for the delete button. and for edit button. Let's change the picture. So I have to write some code here. Okay, let me write it. So we write from widget name dot picture path, and here we can set the picture path. When we use a member function, we always have to give as the first parameter in which state we want to define something, because as you see, we can define every property for every state. So here we say we want by default, so everyone will have the same. I want the pictures that delete.svg. Let's put that down. Do I have this SVG? I think we don't have it. Let's look in the resource. Okay, let's open the resource in the button template. Sorry. Here I see when I have a picture in my template, the lab always create a folder, so it can store every picture and the JSON template, and this will help to organize your template. So let's look in the lab my picture. I have add, delete, edit, add for. So I will replace the add. I don't want to. I don't want to move them. I just want to copy them actually. Let me put them back. Okay. So I have my button, my picture, sorry. Let's use them. So you see when I use the hashtag, it means it's relative to the template folder. So they are directly in the template folder. So copy it for edit button. Okay, so we have our picture. But here my delete and edit button is a little bit small. So let's change the ratio for those two. So let's copy this code. So I will use the picture ratio member function. Let's give it the state, and for edit we want the full size, and for delete we want only 0.85. Let's run it, and yes, this I have a more nice behavior. Okay, I have my 4 button which have all the same design. So the next step, I want to create a FAB button. What is FAB? Is floating action button, and I want to be let's see it. So we see what is a floating action button. Let's call it action button. This button I will put action as a label. I will make it a little bit smaller, let's say 80. So in this button I will add some code. So let me copy it. Okay, so I have a lot of member function. I want this button is a main button. Fab is main button, it will be the main. is animated is to add a small animation, and then I add 3 buttons, add, del, and edit button. And I want my main position is in the bottom left, so it will be here down, and the radius is 100, so the button will be displayed with a radius of 100. Let's try it. So here now they are hidden, my 3 buttons, and when I click on the action button, they will be displayed. So this can help you to hide if you have a lot of buttons in a form, you can hide them and display them only when you activate them. So this is also a design stuff that can improve your interface. So of course we have only 3 here, but you can also change the radius and the start angle and the end angle to make the way you want them to be displayed. So that is the floating action button. Next example will be, we will create a banner. If you remember in the employees, in the last example, when someone is fired, we display a banner. Here we see we don't have banner, so let's implement it. Close everything, and I will open the employee details new. So let's write some code here. So let me copy paste. So here in the onload or onbound variable change, because I don't reload every time my subform. If I change the employee, I just change the bound variable. So that's why we want those 2 events. Then we define a name for my banner. It will be inside the form object, so we create it if it doesn't exist. It will be a corner ribbon type of banner. We have different type in the corner or in the middle, like we see the phone number, it's displayed in the middle. It's also a type of banner, and the name, it will be a ribbon. The background color will be the background color with the opacity of 100%. The position will be bottom right, and the message will be fired. And we check if the entity, my entity is in my employee is in entity form.entity, and in more info have a fired boolean value. So with bool you can avoid to test a null value, because bool of null will return false. So this is a little bit trick. So if it's true, I draw it, else I hide it. And don't forget, for if you unload the form, you will hide the banner, because the banner will be displayed in the first form, the main form, not in the subform. So we have to import the library in the main form. So let me import my library. So let's find it here, the final banner, and I have my library here. No, it's not here. And for the open library. Okay, I open it and drag and drop. So here you don't have any things to do, it's already ready to use. So let's check So let's look at this one is fired. So we see it's really quick to implement and the feedback is really nice. So next example, it will be floating label. So let's see how we can integrate it in our product form. Here we see three labels: product name, price, and stock. It's a simple 4D text widget. So let's see how we can change that. Let's create an input field. We will call it flabel object, obj. I don't want interable, not focusable. We don't want context menu, and we want fill color none, borderline none, and we want bold, and let's put some fancy color. Okay, so of course I have some special color. It's always make it more good to have special number. It make you look like an expert. So the floating label, we will replace the label by the placeholder. So let's design set the placeholder product name, price, and stock. So now we can remove them, and we need to add some code. We have to set some events for the component to work. So we have the onload, on getting focus, losing focus, and on after edit. Okay. So with those four events, our component will be able to work. So let's write the code needed for the component to work. So we create a new object that is the parameter we're gonna pass to our floating label method. So we want the position to be on the left. It can be left or top available. And we want to define the form path. Here it's the where the value will be stored. So here we use form.entity.name. So we tell our component where to look the value. Before we use the dynamic value to know if a variable is a field is empty or not. If you use form, you don't have access to the dynamic variable, so we must give him the where is stored the value to know if it's empty or not. So it's only work on a simple dot notation. If you have collection with element 1, 2, 3, it's not working. But a simple dot notation, it will work. So we want here to check form entity.name, and we give all that in the label. Let's do the same for price. Change the form path, and for stock. Okay, let's check it. Product, we select a product. Here we don't see many difference, but here it's gray out, and when I select a field, the label is automatically colored. So of course the color can be defined with the params for focus and not focus label. So here is just the default color and the one we defined in the form here. So Okay. Yes, if you add a new product, here you see the product name. The label is inside the field as a placeholder, but the problem with placeholder, when we start to type, the placeholder disappear. So that's why when you start to type, we display the label. So there the label have utility because the placeholder is not there. So when we delete, the label disappear and the placeholder. So that's how the floating label is working. So it helps to see in which field you are. So that is the floating label example. The next example, it's a little bit more complex. We will create a breadcrumb. So I will close the button lab and I will open the breadcrumb one. So we have a lab also for breadcrumb to help you to create templates. So again we have two AJUI, but we want now the lab. So a breadcrumb is a more complex object. It's like a button, but we have many sections inside. Here we see we have a complex one with different state, different part and type of state. We have the current one, the previous, the next one, the first one. So every type we can define a specific color for every state over, and but we don't want this kind of breadcrumb. Let's first define the template location for our personal. Let's choose the summit one and okay, breadcrumb template is already there. Let's select it and we save. Let's create a new template in the personal and let's call it module button. Okay, so here we have three model. We have the arrow one, the simple one. So simple is you just have a text character between the elements. The arrow will display an arrow which is customizable between each section. And the grouped button, that is the one we want here. It's a more simple type of breadcrumb. So it's a little bit like a radio button, but a little bit more nice to display. So the box border color we will give a special color 7E. Okay, this one. Size 2, the rest we can leave it. That is a global property of my breadcrumb. I have what we call sections. So section here we see only one I have, but here I want 4 sections, and it will be what we have in our form: company, employees, product, invoice. So we want to replace them. So the first section will be company. The label will be company. Section 2 will be employee. Yes, I have to select it. Employee label. Section 3 is product. Product. And section 4 is invoice. And the label is also invoice. Okay, so we see we have our 4 sections. I have to define a picture path. Okay, so let's select a picture for company. So in the lab we have some open source icons you can choose. So here we will select in government resource. For employee it will be in the it will be commerce client. For product it will be in the commerce cart, and for invoice it will be in it will be commerce and facture. Okay, so I have my 4 icons. I want to also replace the color. So here again they have the 21, 21, 21 color. And I want the picture height will be 100% of the size of my breadcrumb. So we set it for every section. For product 100%, and for invoice. Okay, this value will be used when I defined my different state. So here I have a new combo box and I can select standard or current. For grouped button we have only those two, current and standard, but for other breadcrumb you have more different type: previous, first, default, last, next. So you can define how it will look like. So here let's set the value for standard and the state default. So we will set a background color. Font color, it will be white. And also replacing color will also be white, and this will replace the color of our icon. And want it to be bold. Okay. So for the standard, we want to change on the on over. Here we have nothing yet. So on over, we want the color background is the same, but we want to change the font color. So it will be this one, and we see it's kind of orange, and the same for replacing color. So now we see when I over something, it's show in orange. So let's change for active. So when we click on an element, so the color will be to be more dark a little bit, and font color I want the same like before. I want this orange. So now when I click on one element, it's just changing the background. And I see when I click, the effect disappear. Because when we click on a section of a grouped button, it's become the current one. So we see now we change only the standard and not the current yet. So let's change the style of the current. So let's change the default one only. The background color will be white, and the font color will be this one, this orange. Okay, so now when I click, I see which one is selected. So this way we will be able to select our current module. So let's save this in the personal folder. So let's move this on side and let's open the library. My library is there. Okay. So I just drag and drop it there, and I will put good coordinate. No, it's not that. It's 10, 5 and 530. Let's move this a little bit further, and I will rename it module buttons. So let's put some code for it to work. Let's remove the default code of the library. So that is the code. So we see it's as simple as the button one. We create a new breadcrumb button object, and we give the template name, which is module btn. So simple as that. This should display our breadcrumb, our grouped button actually. So it's display well, but nothing happened because I don't have yet the code. So how do we use a callback function? So what is the code behind those buttons? Is already some factorized code, select module, employee, company, etc. So what we will do, we will create a callback. So here I will copy some code. Okay, so what do this code? I create an object callback params. I will pass it to update section. Update section, I select which section with the ID we defined before, and I will pass some params that have some attribute. So we could update the section with many parameters, the icon, the text, a lot of things. But here what we are interested is we want to pass a callback for the on click. So I want to call this method. And we want to pass some parameters to this callback. So the param is also an object, so module name, company. So let's create this method, and it will get the param and call the select module and pass it the module name params. So we will do it the same for each section. And here we just change the module name for each section, and then we copy the callback to block the reference to the same object. So every callback will have its own params. So with that, we should be able to make it work. Okay, perfect. So we have already something a little bit nicer than simple button. Let's delete those old-fashioned buttons. And here we see it's more complex because for button, each button have one element. Here is only one input, but we have many buttons inside. So it's a little bit more complex. So the next step is not related to our component, but is just to show how quickly you can improve your form. I don't like too much the gray background, so I used to put a white one with a rectangle. Fill color I leave it white. Line color I put to none, and I set it to grow and grow. So with that we have a nicer background. I have to make my my button to move. Oops. So I can close those one. So this save button will be on move, and this one only on vertical sizing move. So I have a background white. It's a little bit nicer. Something else, I will change the list box property to the lining, to remove the lining. I want to remove also the border, if I find it. Okay, borderline none. And I want to change also the alternate color to match our design. Now we see it's gray. We will put something a little bit more blue. Okay, so with those few steps, we see it takes just a few minutes, but we have something a little bit more elegant and that match our design. So let's launch the old one and see the difference. So we see in less than 1 hour we transform our old form thanks to the lab and to the component to something a little bit more nicer. It's not the best, it's something done quite quickly. I'm not the best in design, but the idea is to give you some element to help you to make nice design for your application. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the demonstration and you like the tools we provide. Of course, I was a little bit hard when I say for the application are ugly, and that is true. I know there is a lot of nice application out there, and that a lot of developers tried their best to make something nice with 4D, and the purpose here it was a little bit to get your attention and by provoking a little bit, but some application really need some review and refactoring, and if we want to push 4D solution to be something attractive to new people, we must be careful to make nice interface. So I hope those few tools we have will help you to make something nice. So we have also more tools I didn't cover in this presentation because it's not really graphical tools. Is a Xleaf editor to manage your Xleaf translation even on client server with multiple user using it, and also a unit test component that is based on the Eric Elliott JavaScript component, which is a guru in the unit test. So I get inspired from him to make something nice and really simple in unit test. Okay, so thank you for listening. You can find all the component on GitHub in AJAR project. We share all the documentation also on GitHub. And I invite you also to go and check my blog, my 4D experience. I'm not quite active this time, but there is some interesting article.